Hey everyone, this is Jorge Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited.
Hey everyone, this is Jorge Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited. Today I'm joined by Jason Heltzer, who is partner at Origin Ventures. Jason, you guys have done some really great investments. Of course, I use Grubhub, every day. How's everything in Chicago? How are you?
Everything's great, Jorge. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because Chicago has really grown some great startups over the years, from, of course, Groupon. Hey, they were still great innovators. Grubhub is doing a great job. And of course, the base CRM folks who you're involved with. Tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you actually get into venture investing and working with startups?
Well, thanks again for having me on, Jorge. I started programming when I was 13. It wasn't cool to be a computer nerd back then. It is now, which is good.
Isn't
But
that
back then,
amazing?
what's that?
Isn't that amazing? It finally happened, right?
I know. I'd love to say it was all a grand plan when I was young, but it wasn't. It was just following something I really enjoyed, and it just happened to be a career for me from that point on. So when I was in college, I focused in computer science. I graduated at a time where Netscape had just gone public. And, I spent 4 years out of college doing architecture, design, development work for computer systems. And that was a great time. But I also loved finance. I was really interested in that. And I went off to business school. And after business school, after University of Chicago, I was able to get a job at a venture firm. And I started as an intern, worked my way up over years to become a partner and part of the investment committee. And, now looking back at 16 years, I've done maybe 70 investment transactions over that time. I've had the privilege to work with some amazing entrepreneurs and founders and, I've had a couple of successes along the way. And so, yeah, it's been a really interesting ride. And, I love the variety of the challenges that we have and also the fact that, again, I get to work with great entrepreneurs.
What would you say is kind of the current state of the startup ecosystem in Chicago? I know, again, there's some great B2B enterprise businesses, of course, consumer as well. But what would you say is the kind of the current state or the pulse of it today?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. I mean, I've been involved in this community and also throughout the country in venture investments. But since I'm based here, I get to see it firsthand. And it's the best environment I've seen for startups and for financing for startups in the venture community since I started in 2001. So it's been a long time, and part of that is because we have a lot more seed capital here. We also have 1871, which is a co-working space, which at this point I think is about 120,000 square feet in a centrally located in the Merchandise Mart. It's really amazing to be there, and you can physically see the community coming together and the pulse and all the activity, and it's a real exciting time.
I am a huge fan of Chicago, and one of the reasons why I enjoy it is from a startup sort of ecosystem perspective is you have great education in Northwestern, all over the place. DePaul, of course, Booth, and University of Chicago, but you also have the CPG agencies that have been there for a very long time, which I believe, my opinion is that as the SaaSification of the world continues to happen, you're going to start to see these folks start to buy consumer, or marketing tech or CPG tech and those sorts of things. So I'm super excited. They just seem to have all the elements there. And of course, commodities trading and all the finance that's been there for such a long time. There's some money there. If you're a founder and you're thinking, at your early stage, you're angel, maybe you've raised some money from friends and family, and you're, starting to sort of have conversations with investors early stage, and you're starting to think, how much do I raise? Do I raise, 250 on convertible notes? Do I what do I do? Do I go for $1 million? Do I go for 10? How much is too much and how much is too little?
Yeah, first on the Chicago comment, Chicago is a very, very integrated economy. And you're right, as software continues to eat the world, there are a lot of important customers here in pretty much any category. And because we have a really good continuation of capital here, maybe some of the later stage capital we could use more of, and we have high profile successes. Grubhub is certainly one of the biggest, but Clever Safe and Braintree and on, it's proof that you can build a great business outside of Silicon Valley in the major markets. But to your other question about this amount of capital, you're right. There's this balance. There is such a thing as raising too much capital, where it becomes very hard to meet the expectations of your existing investors and the expectations of new investors as well. And we're lucky to live in an era where a smaller amount of capital can get you much further in a software business, because all of your infrastructure is leased. You're paying for what you're using, and that's an incredibly powerful economic concept, in not just the technology, but the economic concept. It's hard to say any one particular company, but I think the key is that you want to get to a certain set of milestones. And what that really means is that you've squeezed out some of the risk of your business. You've proven the reward a bit, either the probability or the size of the reward. Not tremendous, not definitively, but enough that when you go out to raise more capital, you've shown that that risk is smaller and that reward is bigger. And so that, I think, hopefully is a guide for many of your viewers that can think about how much money to raise to really accomplish something significant, so that when they're going out and thinking about what's that pitch going to be when I'm going to the next round of capital, they've got something really to show for it.
I've seen this a lot of times where an entrepreneur will raise from, 50 different, or let's say, maybe not 50, but their first round, the cap table.
A lot of people, right.
Yeah, exactly. You have like 20 angels and, 5 institutional firms. Do you believe that that's a good strategy to diversify, or do you think that you should keep kind of the cap table, at least early on, as sort of limited or I would say limited as possible in terms of the number of investors?
Yeah, I think that a founder should be guided by a couple of principles. One is that as you take on investors, regardless of what stage, you should attract investors and bring on investors who can help the company, not just the capital. If that turns out to be 10 different people or 20 different people, fine. I don't think that matters so much, the number, as long as it's not an excessive number, because the other principle is that you want the interaction with your investors to be meaningful, and you want the friction and administrative overhead to be lower. As you get more and more investors, the legal complexity, the administrative overhead gets to be a lot bigger. And even for institutional investors like Origin Ventures, when we see a cap table that has a lot of people on it, one of our chief concerns is how much work is this for the team to deal with keeping these investors up to date, the legal requirements and notification, are these investors helping? And so we're very thoughtful in working with the team to figure out that right balance.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks want to follow you on social media, maybe learn more about Origins, what's the best website for Origin, or even just personally for yourself?
Sure. You can find Origin at originventures.com. Not too hard to find it. And you can follow me on Twitter at jheltzer, and happy to hear from any of your guests who listen to the show.
Jason, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. And if there's anything I can do to be supportive, please let me know. I'm kind of cuckoo for startups.
I can tell, Jorge. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.